And Muungano says information is power. Information. Habari ni. Yeah, so information is power. So this will be a day of really consuming information, but also asking ourselves the two critical questions Killian posed for us to reflect as we go on. Yeah, in case of another pandemic, how prepared are our informal settlements, and how did we prepare to do this? So I want to invite the president of Slum International. We have been very fortunate to have the president amongst us. And Bojuri doesn't like really us saying this, okay? But this is a fact. When you're anointed, you're anointed. That's a fact. You can't take it away from you. So yeah, so let's please put our officially open our meeting and then invite Mari to do the keynote address.
Asante Kemani, first of all is to thank you and the team for putting this together. I think it's been a while to interact here. Some of us nikiangalia chana na nikiangalia vile watu wamejikamua walikuwa wanakocha ni lini. I think tumezoea Zoom kuona screen, but I think it's the beginning of these interactions. Even some of us, and I think also it's been a while since Jane, we came into a fancy place. And we made Kemani a jacket. In fact, when I was stepping out the house, so thank you very much. I think Sina Bendi, but as Muungano, I think over the last, during this COVID pandemic, we have been reflecting the last 20 years. And I think we have made a number of strides. We have had successes, we have had challenges, we had to change strategy, but the challenges are still there. I think if you look at the Muungano that was there in the beginning and the Muungano that is now, there have been a number of changes. And I think we are at a point where even slum dwellers, Muungano, we are challenging professionals, we are challenging academia, we are challenging research. I remember when we were doing the ITRC, we challenge all these academic professionals. Please tell us something we don't know. Give us something that we can use. Give us research that we can use. Don't tell us the usual things we know. 60% keep below the poverty line. We know that. I don't know, 10 people don't have access to clean water. We know that. Tell us something that we don't know. And I think that was a catalyst for Muungano and for all the organizations that worked in Mukuru. To start looking at issues deeply, not the usual things that they are used to look at. And I think one of the things for me moving forward and looking at the next 20 years, I think is to challenge ourselves. There have been lessons in Mukuru. I think, I don't know, Jack left. We were somewhere putting up something together in our workshop. And people are struggling. We need to do something different. It's one of the projects we are involved in on climate change. And they were really struggling. We need to do something different. After 2 days, 3 days of planning, doing all these, these Zoom activities, putting things on flip charts, they said the proposal was not good enough. But we told them the proposal, what the proposal lacks is that edge. And I think Muungano brings that edge. The proposal was not disruptive enough. And I think Muungano's history, we have been disruptive in a very positive way. If you look at the railway location, the RAP, that was a disruption. It's doing things differently, it's doing things from not what government, what all this, what the city is not used to. If you remember the railway, it was very straightforward. Railway Yanguka, what we need to do, move people away to Machakos, those Machakos. but to show that there's an alternative, there's another way of doing things. I think Mukuru also is a disruption. I think we challenged Mario and the team at City Hall. There are alternatives. We don't need to do 20-meter roads. If you do 20-meter roads in Mukuru, the whole settlement, if you do just 3 roads, the entire Mukuru is gone. And we are able to look at what are the standards. And the good thing, those are the standards that are being used now. And I think for us is to challenge ourselves looking at Muungano the next 20 years. Let's scale up. Let's amplify our destructiveness. Let's continue to do things different. Kwa hayo machache na marefu ni kumkaribisha mgeni rasmi, our guest of honor, na pia tumefurahi Ajos Professor Emeritus, tumefurahi kukuona. Karibu Mario. Where's the COVID protocol?
So thank you very, very much. I think it's good when you're told to do a keynote address because that saves you from doing a PowerPoint presentation. I think it's quite yeah, so thank you very, very much. And thank you for the invitation. Thank you even for those who have organized this very important session, even as we take stock, because I believe we are taking stock on where we have been and also agreeing on how we can be able to move forward. So thank you. I think for me, of course, I have a fight with Kim after this. You and I have a community. But I'm glad to see many of you. I'm glad to see somebody whose journey started in my office. The young gentleman there was my intern, and I'm happy that we can be able to build capacity and be able to make others think the way we all of us think about the urban tour. So I will speak, today I choose to give a keynote address based on our objectives of the workshop, which I think to me is in order so that you can be able to see how are we adding value to what we have come to do today. And let me start by saying that it's a joy when I hear the president here, when I hear Killian even talking about the interventions that government is doing. It is a joy because this, of course, is a big illustration that we are beyond the time when government used to fight with NGOs. I think we all remember that time. And allow me if I move in between, because I also teach, like our sister at the back there. So I think we are beyond that time when the government was always in an was always fighting with NGOs. I think we all remember that time. In fact, I remember when I started interacting with Jane many, many years ago at the Ministry of Housing, many people used to ask me, how do you work with these NGOs? I think for me and Jane, having come from the same school, for those who don't know, Jane was my senior in high school. And I think she actually infected me in high school. I think the infection began many years ago. So I think we are actually now beyond that time when government was always not agreeing with NGOs. And when we see the kind of things that are happening in Mukuru, I think it is a joy for all of us. How many of us have been involved in the Mukuru planning process here? Show of hands. It is a joy when we see the kind of things that we are seeing. And let me say that the kind of work that we are seeing in Mukuru, we actually did a presentation to the head of state in April last year. And when we looked at that presentation, he actually asked the general, this is the way people are living. And he said, I don't want to see this anymore. Can you start doing something in this settlement immediately? And of course, if we had presented other plans, I believe we have said the same. Kindly also do something else in this settlement. So for me, let me say, when I look at the COVID situation and the kind of things that we are doing in Mukuru, of course, I believe we are all aware that we are doing the simplified sewer system. Have we seen that? in terms of infrastructure. The nature of infrastructure that is being done in Mukuru today, of course, addresses the issue of COVID. We are doing a simplified system. We are looking at issues of water and sanitation. I think we have seen what is being done by NMS today in conjunction with Nairobi Water. We are seeing issues of roads and drainage. And I think Mukuru to me is a big transformation. And I wish we had a resident of Mukuru in this meeting. Any resident of Mukuru? You are resident in Mukuru? What is the feeling of the people in Mukuru today?
The feeling is amazing. No one really expected to see all of those things. Now we have free water. Everyone can access water anytime. There's drainage, there's road, there's a hospital being built. It's amazing.
Yes, and I can say, and we're actually going to do beyond what you're saying. In fact, from my budget, where I sit, I'm also in charge of, I'm in charge of slums, affordable housing, and markets. In fact, in our budget this year, we have actually set aside funds to do a market in Mukuru using my budget. It does not necessarily have to be a huge, modern, 3-floor story market, but we want to see how do we even push on the people of Mukuru, even by giving them a better trading place, because I think we all know that even things like empowering people economically is also a way of pushing them, isn't it? Yes, so I think we are also going to do a market within this financial year. And I think, allow me to say this. Of course, a lot of people have been asking us, how come you are at the county and now you are at NMS, and what you are doing is much more than what you are doing? I think it's all an issue of governance. Eh? And I think for NMS, when NMS says this has to be done, it has to be done. So the people of Mukuru, I can assure you that by next year, June, there will be a trading place for the residents of Mukuru. And we are going to work with Jane and the team that we have planned Mukuru with. They are going to agree which is the best position for us to be able to go to this market. So of course, besides Mukuru, as government, we have also done a number of other projects. And of course, Mukuru, there are a lot of lessons, which I believe even through this process chain, we should be able to document, and even the future generations to come should be able to know how was this process done. Of course, we have other lessons. We have, of course, the Kensa project, and I think many of you know the Kensa project. I was also involved in the Kensa project because that is where I actually started my journey at the Ministry of Housing. Of course, with the Magare 4A, we had the Kensa, and then the KISIP, and then after that I left and finally came back again to government. So of course, when you look at the Kensa project, I think the most critical thing for me is the long time it has taken to do housing. I think when you look at the housing that has been done in Kibera, it has been very few units over 10 years, in fact 20 years now. So I think the issue of, and I think that is where now again, I will go posing questions like Killian did. I will allow me to pose questions along the way. In terms of housing, then, is that the best model that we even need to be talking about? Of course, I like the question he has raised about the effect of the kind of housing we are seeing in pipeline. It has a big relationship in terms of health, isn't it? Poor ventilation, there's no lighting because you find buildings are really close to each other. So again, even in terms of if you have to improve the housing situation, then the model we are having in the Kensa project is that the best model for us, where we are doing very few units and again doing them over a very long period of time. Then coming to KISIP. KISIP 1. KISIP 1, I think we all know that in Nairobi County, we were only able to do KCC and Kayole settlements. And when you look at the infrastructure that has been done, of course now the effects of that infrastructure. If you go to KCC village today, the effect of the security of Kenya and the infrastructure, you can now see the transformation in terms of the urban, in terms of the housing. We now have even apartments. But for me, the critical lesson there, what in fact we are saying, we now need to think even as you do security of tenure, as you do infrastructure, how do we then even give people typical designs of the housing that they can do so that we stop having one person has 7 floors, another one has 1 floor, another one has a Babati structure. So how do we again guide the urban design? I think this is something that we as NMS are now saying we need to also now see, because it is obvious that a lot of housing is not done by government, it is done by the private sector, effectively. Because even the people who are doing that housing in the slums, are they not private sector? So how do you now again guide the private sector? How do we enable them even do the tenure and infrastructure for them now to be able to do that housing? Of course, there again we have critical lessons. Let me say that we are now moving towards KISIP 2. In fact, KISIP 2 has started, and I will actually ask Jane that I leave because I have a meeting on KISIP 2 at 2 p.m. We are now moving towards KISIP 2, and as I talk about KISIP 2, I will address the issue of the data on the slums. Because this is one of the things that we are also going to do under KISIP 2. So under KISIP 2, we have identified 13 settlements for Nairobi, where we are going to do intervention. We have divided them into 2 phases. Phase 1 has 5 settlements, which are our Soweto. We have Bakasi Village. We have KCC Village again, which was also in KISIP 1. We have Kayole Soweto. And finally, we have a settlement where some of you worked, Kambimoto. Anyone who worked in Kambimoto? Kambimoto is actually going to benefit from infrastructure under KISIP 2, and this is going to be under the first phase of settlements that we have identified. And the reason why we have divided them into phases is that phase 1, we already have the engineering drawings ready. So we can quickly move into finalizing, making sure that everything is okay, and now purely going into the tendering process. Phase 2, we have 8 settlements which do not have engineering drawings, and these are Huruma Fire Victims, we have Kumwani Majengo, we have Spring Valley, and Matopeni in Kayole, we have City Carton, I think in Buruburu, we have Redeemed, we have Madare, Fire Victims, we have Ex-Grobo and Muchiwa Huruma in Buruda. And besides these 13 settlements, we are also going to identify other settlements where we do planning and do planning for tenure security, because these settlements are planned. So we also want to identify other settlements where we'll be able to do planning and be able now to bring them forward, maybe to infrastructure. Then besides the infrastructure work, we also have one major activity we also want to do, and that is going to address the question that Kilion and the gentleman at the back and the UN gentleman raised. And let me say that slums in Nairobi are not 158. They are not 158, they are more than 158. And what we are doing this year, jointly with the national KISIP team, we are actually going to do a consultancy to be able to map all the settlements in Nairobi. We actually wanted to do a mapping exercise, but they asked us, instead of using this fund, because there's already money for that, use it for something else, let us support you in that exercise. So there's a national exercise that is going to be done for all settlements in Kenya, and we have requested that, can you start with Nairobi? We want to know what settlements we have, what is their condition, because again, even if we make meaningful projection, data is critical. And I think data is even one of the things that is going to push on us, even as we think about resilience, and even again about COVID. I think even what Kilion has shared is simply data. So without data, you cannot be able to know what is it that you really want to address. Okay? So allow me to now briefly talk about objective number 2, influencing socio-economic benefits to be embraced in the short term to foster future resilience within the urban core. Here, allow me to speak through 5 points, and based on our experience, again, on what we have done in Muku and what we have been doing to prepare settlements for the second phase of KISIP. So one of the things I think we need to embrace as a country, we need to move beyond the conventional upgrading of settlements, where we just do roads, we do water, we do, the hard infrastructure. Let us now start thinking about the soft infrastructure. Let's start thinking about skills and innovation. Yes, we know we have people, we have had COVID, but how do we even enhance skills of even the people in the settlement? Even do your own soap washing, soap, the hand washing soap. We have these businesses that are thriving in other places. So how do we enhance the skills and innovation gene in this settlement so that we simply stop doing water? We can still do them, but let us also think about the person. How do I cushion the Mukuru recipe? Okay? That is why NMF is now saying, let's look beyond this physical infrastructure. Let us give them a market. Let us give them a good place to trade. Such that a place that is clean, a place that has water, a place that has all those other facilities, but let us now think about this individual in terms of promoting their skills and their innovation. Number two, and I think this is where now we'll ask, how do we work now with civil society to mobilize savings from the people? Because I think one of the hard lessons that we have learned, a lot of businesses have actually crashed, isn't it? Even for some of us, some of us are only lucky that we have that job. You are having a salary at the end of the month, isn't it? But how many people were running businesses and their businesses simply could not move on? Isn't it? So I think in terms of even mobilizing savings for the community so that they can also be able to know that even in hard times, I have something I can always lean on to, isn't it? And again, even that saving for them to even be able to even do the businesses we are talking about, isn't it? And then of course, number three, and this is where now Muungano. What does Muungano mean, by the way? Muungano ni nini, Kim? Muungano ni federative, isn't it? So how again do we mobilize our community? Because I think we all know when we are better together, isn't it? We are always better together. And I think that is why, have you ever seen a one-man demonstration? Eh? Have you ever seen? If you are a one-man demonstration, what will happen? Apart from Mutata. So if you are a one-man demonstration, what will happen? If you are a one-man demonstration, and then hata utashikwa na askari, huyu wazimu wanafanya nini town? Si ni kweli? Yes, so there is always beauty in numbers. So how do we mobilize our communities to be able to speak one voice, for them even to be able to identify their needs, for them to be able to say this is the kind of development that we want. And then number four is looking at those other cross-cutting issues that many times we ignore. Okay? Issues of gender, issues of persons with disability, issues of the youth, issues of even health. And we have seen, of course, many times people will not think about even doing a hospital, but I am glad that NMS has actually even done this health facility. Of course, when you improve people's health, you do a lot of other things. I think from the studies on the poverty penalty, etc., I think the research that brought the Mukuru project, I think there were a lot of issues even to do with water, health, etc. And maybe I think I would love to see us even doing research. I can see my brother there also with us in Mukuru. What are even the effects in terms of health that we can see even from the planning, the development that we are seeing in Mukuru? Is there any effect in terms of health? How are we able to measure this? So I would love, James, are we even able to see what is the actual impact of some of these things that we are doing here? And then I think finally in terms of cushioning ourselves, I'd also pose a question. Most of the projects that we do, and this is now where I'm addressing you as civil society, most of these projects are funded by development partners, isn't it? As a country, must we rely on donor funding? Must we rely on donor funding for us to be able to make meaningful interjection in our settlement? If the donor funds are not there, what happens? Are we all going to die of COVID? Yes? If the donor funds are not there, what happens? We all die of COVID. So I think we need to even look at government, Jane and team. How do we start even ensuring that we have budgets set aside for development of the urban core? After NMS, what happens? We go back to the same thing. No hospitals, no water, no nothing in the slums. Is that what we want? No. So in terms of even sustainability, then I think as government we need to now start seeing how do we now stop relying on these donor funds, because we believe in there are a lot of resources in our country, and how do we even partner with even the community? I was discussing with one of the people who are doing a review of the sewer system in Mukuru yesterday. And I think one of the things that we were seeing, I think even for the communities, if they, for example, even participated in, or even mobilized a few resources, or even gave their labor as part of the resources, I think they would be more committed to even maintaining that sewer system. True, my sister? But rather than when we give everything for free, what wanajua hii ni mali ya umma, hii ni mali ya serikali. So you can actually throw a paper, you can throw your banana peel from your car, kajo itakuja kukokota. Isn't it? You can use your sugar cane and throw it anywhere because kajo itakuja kufanya nini? Kukokota. So how do we also build our communities and make them more responsible, even in terms of resources? How do they also contribute towards making some of those facilities or making some of those things more sustainable? Then, of course, strengthening collaboration between different partners and communities. I think it is simply saying the lessons of Mukuru have been great. Nobody can be able to work on their own. Government cannot work on their own. Civil society cannot work on their own. Communities cannot be able to work on their own. We simply have to hold each other's hands. Sisi wote tuwe muungano. Ndio Kim? We simply hold each other's hands and we are able, and that way we'll be able to move forward. So without saying much, thank you very, very much. And Paul, for me, I didn't have a PowerPoint presentation because I wanted to make sure that we are all listening and not looking at the presentation. So asanteni sana.
Awesome. I know there are people even following us online, virtually, they want to ask you one or two questions. So Jane, you can track who is asking question. I know Sheila has already asked one, but if you can be able to link her so that she puts the question herself, it will be fine. But in the room, and Jason knows I'm told, has also asked, imagine you have followers, you have followers, back a number, there are people following your presentation. So I would also ask you kindly to wait for the next. I know you said you leave around noon. That's fine. So we'll have a moment. Jane also wants to say something from your presentation. So Jane Karibu, Karibia, do we start with? Let's start from the inside so that as we get the outside world, the outside world. When your virtual is actually outside, just something on Mariam's presentation. You need a sanitizer. We are protecting all the edge of the zinc.
Mariam, first of all, is to thank you. So much would not have been possible without your commitment. And especially when we were in City Hall, one of the things we discovered is that Mariam had to walk, is it 14 floors to go to work every day?
Yeah.
14 floors down. So every time we went to see Mariam, we had to do the 14 floors. And it was very, very tiring. But Mariam did it in one go. So I'm just saying that talking about those 14 floors, a reflection on the very difficult conditions that we worked under in City Hall during the last regime. And that's when Mariam asked, so how come we did so little in that time and yet we were able to do so much in such a short time? I think that staircase was the challenge. That staircase, to get one thing done, you have to slog very hard. And to thank Mariam and all the team, all the organizations that did the coming from Mukuru for keeping the faith and working those 14 flights time and time again and not giving up. Right from the people of Mukuru, not giving up, the residents, and to the organizations that work. And I agree with you, Mario, that we must begin to look at ourselves for resources. But as we look at ourselves for resources, we must never ever forget that upgrading is not about building houses. Upgrading is not about building ways. It's about the people who live in informal settlements in our country. Because they're going nowhere. Yeah? They're going nowhere. So when we build a house, when we build a road, we must always ask ourselves, what is the impact on the person who lives in Soweto? Have they been displaced by that road? Have the high-rises been built for others, other than the people who lived in Mukuru? And when we build those houses in Mukuru, are they going to be built for the people of Mukuru, or are we going to build them for others? We must be jealous. We must be jealously guard against the displacement of the poor through construction. That's all I say. And asanteni sana. And thank you, Mario, and the whole team. I never thank you enough.
Saying now, Jane, the activist talking. That's very good. Yes, do we have, are they following Rachel or Sheila? Sheila, you wanted to ask something? You can speak, yeah. So Kilon is saying you can speak. You'll be Sheila, Jason, or Sheila, anyone? Anyone in the room in the meantime? So, yeah, but Sheila's text question was on the consultancy. So she was wondering whether Muungano has created a friend in Marriott for Muungano to be involved in the data citywide profiling, given that we've already been doing this work for long. So there was that question she wanted to really pose to you on how can the slum federations be involved in city profiling, the work that they've been doing. All the data that we are referring to has actually been collected by slum dwellers. So how now can that collaboration be enhanced as an opportunity to allow that to continue? So that's a critical question that they were posing. But yes, we'll allow that to happen. So maybe we give Marion, or Jen, you have a question there? Sheila is? Oh, Sheila, but you can't hear. Anyone, please? Our technology, COVID has welcomed us to this, there was a mute, so you can continue. She's trying to say something. Yes.
Some people can hear me, but others can't. So can you hear me in the room?
We are hearing now. Proceed, Sheila.
Okay. So first of all, on behalf of Shack Dwellers International, I am absolutely proud and delighted to see the amazing, this terrific way forward, this flagship program that all of you have put together, that is trying to put behind the traditional way to look at informal settlements and to look forward in preparing each of our cities to address the unanticipated, ununderstood volume of people who will come into our cities in the next 10 years. Issues will not be addressed by formal traditional systems, but this new partnership between community networks and city and provincial institutions that focus on making change happen in a way that works for communities is, I believe, the only way forward. And for all of us in STI, you are the flag bearers of this transformation. And we all watch you, we all applaud you, and we do everything we can to convince all our governments to explore these kinds of partnerships at scale. Because we are talking about hundreds of thousands of families who for 2 to 4 generations have not been recognized by the city in which they live and work. And now, through the work of this amazing partnership and the power of Mungano to make representations, the professionals who support them, and the city that listens to them, these changes are possible. This has a lot of implications for all the things that the world wants to discuss on leaving nobody behind in the SDGs, as well as making sure that those who are vulnerable have access to solutions that make them resilient in the climate change space. We know that Kenya is one of the leading lights in the African countries working towards making climate change the basis of everything that's happening. And I believe in cities also you are leading the way. So congratulations. And we hope that this happens not only in Mukuru and in the other settlements that you are beginning to talk, but it happens more and more with community participation in all the informal settlements in Asia and Africa, where all of us are trying to follow this amazing example. So thank you very much, and I'm enjoying this conversation very much. Over to you.
Asante sana. Shukrian, Makofi. I think that's anyone else from our Zoom participants. Okay, so probably Marion, now you can respond. Asante.
Thank you. I think the main question is on the participation of Mungano in this data filing. Let me say, this of course is a procurement process, and it will be advertised. And it's going to be by the KISIP national team. It's definitely going to be advertised. Of course, we might be involved in the evaluation and all that, but what I would say, this being a procurement process, it will be open for anybody to bid, any firm to bid. So if Mungano feels they are okay to bid, only like food, it will be considered in my list, but you cannot promise that it's going to be this because it's going to be a procurement process. I think there's something, and now that I'm on the floor, there's something I forgot. The Mukuru plan has actually been done through collaborative effort. We had, I think, 42 partners came, and I think it was amazing, and it was very humbling to see partners putting their resources together to support the thematic areas. Yes, because for us as a county, the resources we put together was simply for bringing the stakeholders together and reviewing the progress of it. But in terms of the thematic area, our partners, they supported that entire process. It is very humbling to see the kind of resources that have gone into that work in terms of the financial, the human resource, and I think as government, we can only say thank you very, very much. We can only say thank you, and of course also assure that we are committed to ensuring that that plan is implemented. But of course, Jane and team will also urge if there are resources to go towards implementation of other things in Mukuru, I think we also want support. And of course, I know the housing issue was not discussed in terms of the plan, and I think that is an issue that an area that government will also be coming into, and I think there again we'll be discussing with you, our partners, those who plan to go with us, on how best we can be able now to move forward in terms of the housing plan. But thank you very, very much for the support that you have given us.
Thanks, Sana. Yes, yes, I think that's awesome. But I want to introduce our moderator for the next session, which will be presentations, and I can see them in his hand up. Maybe before that, because I want to combine now our contributions in the presentations. Asante. So someone saying Josiah is an inspiration. He delivers real change in a practical and inclusive way. He works with great care and consideration, but also with clarity and direction. That's Josiah Omoto, our moderator today for our presentations, who I want to humbly hand over the microphone to take us through now our next step. Tumkaribishe na makofi ndugu Josiah wa timu. Let me sanitize for you. Sorry.
Hamjambo. Najua ni baridi and climate change is real. I came to this city in 1963, and this is the coldest month I've ever experienced in this city. Very, very cold. So climate change is real. In Kiswahili tunasema hii baridi ni noma. Nilisikia juzi jamaa akitoa shairi, hii baridi ni noma. Ewe Mola tunusuru. This is also a very, very unique time in terms of the pandemic. Tangu tuzaliwe hapa Nairobi, wana OCS, hii lugha ya pandemic ni mpya. So this is also a very, very unique time in terms of the corona pandemic. From this moment onwards, in the history of change, people will be talking about BC and AC. People will be talking about BC and AC. BC before COVID and AC after COVID. There are things we're doing in BC which will totally change in AC. Mambo ya BC tumeishia kwa head. So there are matters that we'll be doing in AC that are totally different. This is the time in this city that we have washed hands. I've never washed my hands as much since I came to this city in 1963 like I've washed the past 1 year. If there was, I know there's soil erosion, if there was hard erosion, we would not be having hands. So we have really washed hands. So I want to welcome you for the session on the presentation. Kwanza, I want to recognize the President of Islam Dwellers International, Raisi, Joseph Muturi. You call me a Jos, I also call you a Jos. Our sister, Marion Rono, representing government. We're very, very proud to see you. I've seen you grow. I'm very, very happy to see our people from the Islam Dwellers International, Joseph Kimani and Jack Macau. It's a pleasure to stand in front of you today. It's very, very humbling. Our professional colleagues from the universities and planning, thank you very much for being here. Our colleagues from other civil society organizations, and of course, the reason we're here, our primary partners, representatives from the community groups. Welcome. Najua ni baridi, it is very cold. Can we all clap for ourselves as we go to the next session? Of course. We want to start our presentation. This afternoon, it will be about 8.5 minutes each. We'll start with Sheila Patel.
Oh,
Sheila?
Just a bit of introduction. Just a bit of introduction. Sheila does not require any introduction. She is synonymous with social movements, synonymous with urban dynamics, synonymous with policy advocacy. Sheila is a founder of SPARC. I've been privileged to go to India and we interacted with Sheila, so I really, really respect Sheila Patel. I'm going to say, as Omoto says, I respect you, he means it. And Sheila has had several awards from the World UN Habitat Award in the year 2006, to the Mumbai Vision Award of 2015, to the David Rockefeller Bridging Leadership Award of 2011. We are very, very proud to have Sheila presenting, and can we all give you a hearty clap for Macaulay City of Nairobi? Macaulay and Kennedy.
thank you very much. When you talk about old awards, it tells you how old I am and how long I have been doing this work. Thank you very much. With all of you, I congratulate Joe for leading us in SDI and the Kenyan Alliance of all these amazing organizations that are trendsetters, not only for us in SDI, but also for all the people who want to work with the urban poor. As mentioned earlier in one of the comments by a speaker, COVID has transformed our lives, and so it is definitely going to be before COVID and after COVID. If we truly, truly want to look at this world as if it's a planet that is interconnected, because this devastating infection proved that it is affecting all of us, but it's affecting the poor much more, and it's demonstrating the deep divide between how those who live in formal institutional arrangements have a different set of amenities and services versus those who don't. For us in SCI, it has shown that many gains taken in the past 20 years of our functioning have been eroded by 1.5 years of this devastating pandemic. At the same time, it has brought very strange bedfellows to explore solutions together. More of us are talking to more cities and more governments than ever before. In STI, we have begun to see the amazing impact of the neglect of preventive and promotive health on the lives of the poor. And we have seen that the antiquated development planning that performs the legal framework for investment in cities is 2 centuries old and has to be changed. And like I said before, the amazing work of the last 20 years of the Kenyan federations and the professional institutional arrangements that work with them have demonstrated the power of data, of organized reflections, and innovative solutions that come from below, to shake hands with those in government that want to make a difference. Not all citizens and not all governments want to work in partnerships and alliances. Yet it's very clear that top-down or just work. We have to look at ways by which we're conscious of what we can contribute, what we can learn, and what we can negotiate together. And sitting here in the physical room as well as in our digital rooms, you see long-term partnerships of people who live in different continents, focused on working together over long periods of time that allow us to learn, share, and contribute to each other. We believe that in the African context, the city of Nairobi has much to contribute. We were also informed recently that the one that is this year is going to be in Glasgow, COP26, and the next one is going to be in Africa. And we hope that all the work that we all do together, as cities, as slum dwellers, as governments, allows us to lead much of how. And so I congratulate you, and I thank you for inviting me, and I hope that once we can travel again, I can be physically present in Nairobi. Because I remember in 2000, being taken by Jane Bell and others, me and my colleague, to meet the chief of the Nairobi city, who said that, oh, we have so many slum dwellers in Nairobi. And I said, I come from Bombay, which has 5 times more slum dwellers. So we have to solve all these problems together, and we have. We have learned a lot from each other, and we are inspired by the things that happen in different cities, and we try to make them happen in ours. So my best wishes, and I hope that what's happening will continue, and that we learn from this devastating COVID crisis the power of community participation and problem solving, and the frontline preparedness of community leaders to make change happen. Thank you.
For our sister Sheila, let us give a clap and a tattoo and another flying kiss. Moja, Billy, a flying kiss. Thank you very much. Our next presenter is Dr. Well, those with questions, you can still just skip the questions. We'll have a session for question and answer. And thank you very much, Sheila. Our next presenter is Dr. Rachel Tulhurst, the research director at the GCRF Accountability for Informal Urban Equity. Dr. Tulhurst is a social scientist, very interested on issues that shape national and global policies and best practices. We're very happy to have you with us this afternoon, particularly in your role in driving change in the research unit on matters lung health and tuberculosis in Africa. So extend a warm hand of applause and a warm hand of applause to, from Akol Nairobi to our Dr. Rachel Tulhurst. Karibu, Dr.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, fine. I am, as Joe Muturi said, I'm proving that I'm a Mzungu because I have slides. I have a PowerPoint presentation. I'm not able to share it from here. Jane Kemani, are you able to share for me? Or are you able to allow me to share? I'm not allowed to share my screen from here.
Yes, you can share.
I can share now? It tells me that I can't share, so I think you may have to share for me or give me permission to share.
Now you can share.
Oh, let me try again. Ah, yes, I can share, thank you. Now I have to actually find my presentation. It's not mine. Sorry, I'm just trying to find my presentation. Hopefully it will be with us soon. This needs to be on normal and okay, hopefully you can now see the first slide of the presentation.
Yes.
Is that coming through?
Yes.
Sometimes it takes some time.
Yeah, it's coming.
It's coming through. Great. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me. I feel very humbled to be in this very esteemed company today. It's very difficult to follow Sheila Patel, but I will do my best. So, as has been said, I'm the research director of the ARISE Hub. And ARISE is a research consortium funded by the UK Global Challenges Research Fund, which focuses on improving equity for health and well-being in informal urban settlements through accountability. And I've been asked today to talk a little bit about the work of ARISE, some of the work of ARISE in Nairobi, and particularly in the Mafari. During the COVID pandemic, and I don't know if we will ever have an after COVID and AC, but continuing now. And to really put this in a global context and join the conversation, contribute to the conversation about where do we go from here to build forward better. So let me just tell you a little bit more about ARISE. So we are 11 organisations working across 5 countries, so partners from the UK, from Kenya, from Bangladesh, India, and Sierra Leone. And you can see some of us, many of us in this picture, the last time that we had a face-to-face meeting before COVID, BC, in Dhaka, Bangladesh. Very sadly, that was in July 2019, and we've not been able to all be together since. Our hosts in Nairobi today, the Muungano Alliance, are one of our ARISE partners in Kenya. The others are LVCP Health and APHRC, which I think will both be represented in the meeting today, so that's great. So let me just introduce very briefly what ARISE is about. So our vision, the joint vision of the partnership, is to catalyse a step change for improving accountability for health and well-being for people living in urban informal settlements. And the way that we aim to do this is through community-based participatory action research cycles. So this means that researchers work together with community members to collect data on health and well-being problems and how these relate to governance and accountability issues. So as Joe Muturi said, to try to delve a little bit deeper beyond the obvious fact that there are mental health and well-being challenges for people living in informal settlements, to ask why do we face these challenges, how can we come together to address these challenges, how are the challenges we face different, for example, for gender, for people living with disabilities, and so on. And we then, once we've collected that data together, we work together with a range of stakeholders, including government and non-government stakeholders, to plan and implement actions to improve the situation. And then we then monitor the actions, adapt them as necessary, And we share our learning within our consortium, within the cities where we're working, across the countries where we're working, and globally. So when the COVID pandemic hit us, we had just started to collect data together in Nairobi, in Mathare, in Mukuru, in Korogocho, informal settlements, and also in Dhaka, Bangladesh, in Freetown, Sierra Leone, and in 6 Indian cities, including Sheila's home city of Mumbai. But we pivoted, we had to pivot to support communities and to work together with government departments to respond to the crisis. And as a consortium, we shared lessons together and we aimed to support each other both emotionally, morally, and practically. And the lessons we learned as a consortium resonated with the experiences of people living in informal settlements everywhere. And I think many of these have been mentioned. I don't want to, as Joe said, tell you things that you already know. But it became quickly clear globally, didn't it, that there are substantial challenges to preventing the spread of infection in informal settlements. And these are not new challenges. We knew about these challenges. People living in these informal settlements face these challenges every day, but the COVID pandemic simply drew attention to these globally. But beyond these kind of more obvious challenges to preventing infection, as I think Killian mentioned earlier, people have been faced with very difficult, perhaps unprecedented challenges during the COVID pandemic, the choice between going to work, perhaps risking infection or not working, and risking not having the means for daily survival. And as we know, social protection systems in most countries did not protect informal workers, so there was really no safety net for people. And this has led, as we know, to widespread hunger. It led to other deprivations, reduced access to health services and other services. We have seen in most contexts increases in gender-based violence and violence against women and girls in particular. So again, these problems are not new. These problems have been there for some time, but they have been exacerbated by this unprecedented shock to economies all around the world. So coming back to Nairobi, I know we're all aware of the importance of the economies of informal settlements to the city economy. So work done by the Muungano Alliance together with Professor Coburn, who will speak shortly, showed, for example, that 1/5 of the annual revenue attributed to Nairobi County in 2017 was generated just through Mukuru. We also know that the work of Muungano and others has shown us that people working in the informal sector have been particularly vulnerable during COVID. And so at least 43% of the population of informal settlements have faced high levels of food insecurity, according to the ICC. And there has been some government provision, and we heard earlier about particularly for groups recognised as vulnerable, so there's been some provision of emergency food and water, but the data collection of Muungano and others, including the IPC, has found that this really wasn't enough. Government aid has been understandably targeted at groups recognised as vulnerable, such as the elderly, people with chronic illnesses, such as HIV/AIDS, people with disabilities, and orphans. So the Muungano Alliance used their experience, their skills, their networks in reliable community-based data collection to collect and share information about the challenges faced by residents of the informal settlements. And I'm going to talk particularly about data that they collected from May to July in 2020, and I think this has been mentioned. I couldn't always hear very well at the beginning, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating things. But one of their findings was that there were many people living, particularly I'm going to talk about Mathare village, but I'm sure this is not unique to Mathare, Mathari community areas, there are a number of villages in Mathari. So one of their findings was that there were many people who were vulnerable, who were facing food insecurity, who were facing deprivations, who fell outside of these so-called vulnerable categories. There were also people who met the criteria but were not able to receive the aid that was provided. And in particular, many young people lacked family support. They lacked strong networks which would enable them to continue to make an income. But they still faced all the high costs that we know that face access to health services, paying rent, food, water. And so they didn't have support systems. And they felt very left out, very disenfranchised, and this really increased the community tensions that already existed. And another major issue has been the lack of verifiable, transparent information that can be used to provide support and target support in the communities, particularly about residents who might be entitled to support. And I think this has already been mentioned this morning, this lack of reliable data. So community residents, together with Muungano and other community-based organizations, many of you are here today, I think, decided to do a pilot project where they enumerated some of the villages in Mathari. They gave them physical addresses, so they mapped them. They are working currently to give them physical addresses. So they're working with the Filter project to think about the best way of generating physical addresses, working with young women who have been trained to do this. And their intention is to register these addresses with the county government. And then use this as a basis for really verifying residents, verifying entitlements, and ultimately to give a basis for accessing social protection, so particularly a basic universal income. So,
Recording in progress.
Sorry, I was just being informed that I was being recorded. So by this I mean a temporary, initially at least, payment, unconditional cash transfer that is made to individuals and families on the basis of their residence, which enables them in a time crisis to pay for food and other basic needs like rent, like water, like healthcare and education, in order to keep them really out of falling into deeper poverty or falling into poverty, which, as we know, has long-term effects. So, just trying to move my slides, and it seems to be stuck. There we go. So just zooming out a little bit to the international community again. I think Sheila has already said this, but COVID-19 has really been described as a wake-up call, alerting the global community to the urgency of accelerating progress in building social protection systems. And we don't yet know what after COVID will look like, but as Sheila and others have already mentioned, we know that climate crisis is upon us. It's not going to be the last crisis that we face, and that we need to find better ways of facing together through global and city-level solidarity. So even before the pandemic, 55% of the world's population were not covered by social protection, and we know that there's been a lack of attention to the urban poor, in particular, in social protection systems. We also know that there's a range of estimates, but one estimate is that 490 million people globally may fall into poverty as a result of the pandemic. So that's multi-dimensional poverty, not just income, but deprivation of basic needs, including access to education and health. So in other words, the ability to live a dignified life. But there's strong and increasing evidence for the positive short and long-term impacts of unconditional cash transfers, so providing at least a temporary basic income to residents. So, for example, one trial in Kenya, a randomized control trial, so a very strong form of evidence, found really positive short-term impacts of unconditional cash transfers. So, for example, positive impacts on consumption and food security, as you might expect, but also on protecting assets, revenue from self-employment, people being able to continue with work, as well as psychological well-being and a reduction in sexual and gender-based violence, which, as we've mentioned, has increased during the pandemic. So the UNDP, the United Nations Development Programme, calculated the feasibility globally for providing temporary basic income as a form of social security. And in Kenya, they estimated that this would cost between 0.72 and 3% of GDP. So 0.72 being about bringing people up to a basic poverty level, and 3% of GDP being about making a uniform lump sum transfer that was sufficient to meet basic needs. So it is within reach to do this, and it would have a range of really important, both short and medium-term implications and impacts, particularly contributing towards maintaining human development, human capital. Clearly, if our populations are falling into debt, are falling further into poverty, are not able to educate their children, are experiencing long-term health problems that they are not able to manage, then this is not a population that is going to develop well, that is going to be a healthy, happy population, that is going to contribute towards our city and our national economies, as we know people living in informal settlements do. So what has been pointed out by people researching social security is that we need to create a fiscal space to fund this. So we need to find ways to get this into national budgets. Global institutions and the international community have a role to play here. I hear what Marion and others have said, that we do need to hold our national governments and our city governments accountable for contributing to social security and safety nets. But the international community may also have a role to play here, for example, through using debt relief using debt relief so that we can use what otherwise may be debt payments to fund social security expansion, using innovative tax mechanisms for the global community and linking that to cash transfers, particularly for the poor, including the urban poor. There's a need to develop administrative capacity. Now, this is something that somewhere where I think Kenya and Nairobi are very well placed, with a very strong capacity for digital cash transfer, and there's a need to develop accountability mechanisms. And this is where I think in the administration of the accountability mechanisms, it's very clear that partnership between networks such as the Muungano Alliance, between civil society and community-based organisations, and between government are going to be really critical. And we've seen a really excellent start to this, as Sheila has said, through the SBA mechanisms and through this kind of partnership and joint planning that communities and governments are doing together. And this is another way, another direction that we can take this to provide social security and resilience for the urban poor. So I'm not going to talk much more. I just want to say, really, in conclusion, expanding social protection is a really important part of mitigating the short and the medium and even the long-term impacts of COVID. And it's really an opportunity now. We have an opportunity now to strengthen our social protection systems. for the long term, because this will have positive impacts on our social and economic development and our resilience to the shocks that unfortunately we know will still keep coming for cities and nationally. And really a recognition of the rights and entitlements of people living in informal settlements is key here. Everything we do needs to be grounded in that recognition. As Jane Wary said, people are not going away. They have a right to be in our cities. They have a right to have a dignified life and have their basic needs met. And they make huge contributions towards our cities. So municipal and national government and the international community all have roles to play here. But really importantly, we all need to work in partnership together. We need to work in partnership with community-based organisations such as the Muungano Alliance. And I'm really humbled and proud to play a small part in those partnerships through the ARISE consortium. So there's a little bit more reading and resources here. Do have a look at the ARISE website. And these are the kind of boring academic references to what I've been saying. And I'd like to acknowledge the GCRF, our funders, and to say Asante Sana to you all for listening. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rachel Fulhurst. From a cold Nairobi, the club, Moja, Billy. Thank you very much. Our next presenter is Mary Kimoro. Over 15 years publishing experience in research and academia, consultancy, agriculture, county, SDI, and Price Waterhouse. What Mary Kimoro is bringing here today is a background in financing and matters in insurance. Welcome, Mary Kimoro. Have a coffee, everybody.
So now, poverty penalty reloaded.
Muungano. Habari zenu. Today I am very humbled because I'm standing on the shoulder of giants. I mean, I've read of Sheila, and it is always, now it is inspired to one day sit in a room and hear her speak. I have journeyed with Jane, who has changed me from theoretical to make me Naitango poverty penalty reloaded. So today I just present myself as a learner in different capacities. I'm currently undertaking my forever PhD. And I present different insights of how this has grown through, and I really look forward to Jason's critique and growth. That's where I get it from. Let me start with this. I'm bringing the numbers, and I echo what Sheila had mentioned, that sometimes the power that has grown over time is the power of data and organized interventions to shake hands and negotiate with different stakeholders. And I'm a biased number person who has come to realize that numbers do not tell the whole story. So here is the first story I take. These two pictures I took myself. The first in Mukura in 2018, and the second one I took from Greenhouse. Don't mention the quality of my phone, we enhanced the photos. But we tend to think that the down part is what we want to see in Nairobi, that the up moves down. And maybe that's one very uncontextualized sense of what we try to perceive or aspire to in this place. But the truth is, the person at the top is paying much more, sometimes 3 times more than the person at the downside.
So how can we live with such a contrast? And therefore, what does it mean when we sit to deliberate with data now, with the city, county, and now the Nairobi Metropolitan? First thing, I'm going to try and use a funnel way, which I've learned through, I've been taught well that that's where the funnel comes from, because we live in a global world. And that's one of the key messages, that when we went and saw and quantified the numbers in Mukuru, in Mathare, in Kibera, something that we had seen before, but now we're quantifying, and I think they opened the eyes, the lens open, that we were not saying anything new. I picked different pictures. The first on your right-hand side, I would credit the aha moment to you, Marion, because there was one time we were having a debate in a similar setup, and Marion, you mentioned that when you talk about a homeless person, in the Western sense and in the Kenyan sense, those are two different things. That person in Canada sleeping on the streets of Canada does not have anywhere else to go. That is home. That umbrella is home. But maybe in our Kenyan context, there may be a sense of choice and an element of options, which we will consider and deliberate on. The 2009 picture in Boston, again, this bringing the idea that many people are tenants in Nairobi, as the same case in USA. But for their case, when we were talking about foreclosures, it was a case of somebody trying to make everybody buy a home. You all remember that 2008-9? Whole idea about everybody should own a home. And suddenly you move people from a worse to a worse situation. The last case is an ongoing legal suit, I believe, that today a person in Mukuru has better quality water than a person in New York. Now New York has brown water taps, and that is what that is what the president hopes to see, that right now you have infrastructure in US that is more than 100 years old. So it's a case of almost a cyclical world that brings us to this space. What we see about the urban poor may not be isolated to Nairobi alone. Three key ideas that I hope to mention. The first is that the urbanization of Nairobi is not a Mukuru problem. Maybe if we move our eyes, when we focus something, if you look at somebody's heart, and you look at it very close, you can think it's the whole world. But when you move outwards, you actually see the whole forest. That maybe the whole problem cuts across. And beyond ownership, what can we amplify from Sheila's word that we can organize and regulate to see the transformation that we seek? It doesn't necessarily be stone and mortar. And finally, what are these investable opportunities? I come from a number perspective, where if you tell me somewhere is 3 times more valuable, I should be putting my money there, should inside. Let me first start to be very quick. Anytime that you bring yourself into a space, I came in 2013, Killian, George, Constant, around the same time with them. So we are post-zinc. Same post-zinc. You always have to position yourself and what element, what difference do you see? Because I can never see the whole world the same way that President sees it. Or the fact that you grew up in a different situation. But I can never see the same. What do I see differently? So let me bring just who Mary is in a very short while. That being born in 1982, I was born in. I'm those ladies who are very proud of their age. Do the math. So I'm trying to. But I was born in those. We are told you're the 7% born and raised in Nairobi. But I went into Umoja when Umoja was a site and service. Then the site and service didn't work very well. So I still see the attempt my father had at that time. and what has become the skyscraper today in that space. Then, a myriad of reasons, I moved to Isili, and my mom, and we are all in one single room. We are pretty much 4 or 5 human beings, and you split the room for a long time. Yeah? So after about 6 or 7 years out of Nairobi, because Nairobi becomes too difficult at night. But when we return, we come again to another plan of the government. Now, high-rise, I probably stayed there for 15 plus years. Now, high-rise it was meant for Kibera residents who did not take it up, and we kept all the receipts. We bought it for 220,000 shillings. Then, and at that time, we were debating with a family friend who bought Langata for 320,000. But you can see how the value has changed over time. I do not buy into the story that the people who were investing in Kibera were bad people. Because my neighbor was a slumlord. But for her, she was very clear, I am going to be a slumlord because I'm going to create better, I'm going to go make units, and in 3 years, I pay school fees for my children. At the same time, I had friends who chose to live in Kibera. And they had a fridge, we did not have a fridge. Let's be very clear. There are people who are richer than me, than my family, living in Kibera. And I could see that. So the contrast, maybe the lens I bring, I emphasize here is a critical theory. But I can say that I cannot buy to the story that it is a panacea of everything. That this is a blanket, black and white contrast that you can create. And there are different things that we can look at in terms of value propositions. So hopefully at the end of it, you just crunch a few numbers, very simple, and why they exist and why they grow can be an answer we give. I've had interviews and a bit of data collection over a long period of time, thanks to working through SDI and looking at not only the residents, but also those who have transitioned out of residencies and those who still continue to invest in the same spaces up to today. In fact, 2 of them incidentally were parents of students in Strathmore School, Strathmore University. That doesn't say Strathmore is supporting, but it tells you the context of the contrast of why people are choosing to invest in these spaces. So let me also position Nairobi very quickly. Nairobi, since Nairobi started in 1896, individual private owners have dominated Nairobi, nearly 84 to 86%. Okay. And over time, you can say you can split the city into 3s. The zinc, I guess the Mabati, the third, then the tenements that are still growing are now positioned more at 36, and then what you think is 4. To be original, you have to go back to the origin. Watch my words, Antonio Gauci, and he's the Barcelona architect, the famous Barcelona architect. But I'm just going to walk 5 paces of how did we end up with the Nairobi we see today. And I had somebody has grown like from 1963. And our OCS, maybe they can tell us if it is true. So we don't use the word apartheid for Nairobi, but it was apartheid. When you're told to live separately, you are apartheid. And what apartheid did is that it did not cater for the guys who came from the durable town. And that meant right from 1900, we started informality and illegality. There's a question of what informality is. Remove the word IN, you have formal. So it just means who recorded you. Informality means who chose to record what was not chosen to be recorded. So they were chosen not to be recorded. Therefore, they started, and there is a very good book by Hake, and the first town plan in 1927, again done in 1948, gave what you could call the urban poor because of the black, 1%. And today we have what is the occupation for the slum? 6%. But what is the land space used? 6%. We've just been taking little bit out of the 1% that was ever allocated to the same group of people.
Now, the biggest change where people started seeing a difference was the Labour Party. These are the political movement. Labour Party in Britain came in 1945, made for one year the first settlement. Then after that, why do we say that Kibera has one dominant group and then Madare has another dominant group? In fact, Madare was a creation that apparently from writings by Masilo in the 50s, an attempt to detribalize. Then you start creating the whole idea of infusing some political questions around the people who choose to live here. We had a very famous paper, the sessional paper in 1965, specifically clause 83.4, that at that time started saying we should own homes. Nobody questioned that we always started with a different tenancy system. And then thereafter that Kensap and Kisik, where Marion comes in, would initiate the whole slum upgrading program. I think less than 1,000 units in 20 years can speak a lot. We're not speaking about a house alone, but a house brings a lot of those amenities. It's that unit that holds everything together. And the addition I would put in there is the new plan. My understanding the new plan chose not to map the informal settlements as part of the agreement with the Japanese group, but also they are trying the transformation again with ownership. So that positions where Nairobi has come here, and this just gives the Big Four agenda. Big Four agenda, if you think about it, you're asking somebody to buy a single room for 600,000 shillings unless something has changed with those numbers. Quickly to the findings, that's just halfway through. The first big number that we speak, and what I want to contextualize this is that these numbers are not for Nairobi alone, they're not for Nakuru alone, they're not for Africa alone, they're a global number now, especially the water penalty. I think it's just cutting across, and those are issues that can bring one of us to the table. That if one way to look around it, instead of calling it a penalty, is to cancel out penalty and say opportunity or premium. And that was, I would say that's Jack Macau's way of helping me see differently. That if I know this person is already paying more than what the government has, then my question is about aggregation to allow big players to come, but I'm not asking for subsidies from Marion Latin. I do not need subsidies, and therefore I can be able to transform with it. This again just simply puts the question of investment in different in different options within the city. I think I want to put a context here why Nairobi needs to be looked at as a system. The first time we did this, we assumed an investor, a Nairobi investor in Kilimani. Since then, we have a lot of foreign investors in Nairobi who are able to bring in money at less than 5%, less than what the minimum government does, 2%, and they are able to hold that capital for at least 10 years before they have to pay back. Let's give an example to China. What that means is, being practical, next to a school called King International at the end of Agnes Kodek Road, somebody has transformed a single unit, 3/4 acre, to put 479 units today. And we did the numbers, he's going to make $1 billion. Interestingly, he's a Chinese, but he calls himself Gitao. So, the contrast tells a lot. Well, like Gitao, we kept looking around and we're like, no, that's Gitao. Proper. But he's very clear that his numbers add up. He's going to make $1 billion in 10 years, discount it, nobody in government is going to pay for much. So the different, maybe this has changed over time, that you can still invest in the high end and make more if you're getting the money cheaper. Finally, in terms of findings, how do you connect money to opportunity? This I picked from quotes of the two quotes I picked why they brought me as a researcher into them, is because there were parents of students where I was teaching. So I was like, okay,
And this guy, one tells me that one thing that happens over time, you have to remember Nairobi was an accidental capital city. So unlike what the arguments that I will bring to Ethiopia, to the capital city of Ethiopia, where the government can seize land and repurpose land, Nairobi, you're negotiating with an individual guy who by right either bought the land or inherited the land with proper papers, the case of Kawangware, right? So this guy says the only reason he's going to transform and why he is choosing himself to transform from the Mabati to tenements to now quite nice formal suit, which would endear to you, Marion, is because he needs to set his next generation up. He knows he cannot keep up with that. His children are not going to keep up with the Mabati. So him is just, you know how you institutionalize yourself, how you hear big families like the Trump family, that's what he's trying to do. Because he knows his children will not survive that, so he's just transforming the children. And in fact, for the second person, I sat with his daughter. I sat with his daughter. So my daughter is slightly younger than me, gone to school, but they sit there and he's teaching the child how to go to Pipeline, pick your money. And interestingly, in their tenement in Pipeline, she has put her 0722 number on top of the building. So anyone who needs help calls directly the landlord. In Kenya, ukiwa na 22, wewe ni ule msee, right? Then 23, so the 22 number, it tells you the age of the person and how long they've been there. They're not easy there. So it tells you the difference of who we're talking about. The two ones are very good numbers. Just finally, what do the numbers mean and where are we heading to? And I'll keep crediting the giants that I'm sitting on. First is we keep looking at, we sit here and crunch the numbers for Mukuru and ask ourselves as we go to Mathare, the second level, what should we not miss out? Then we forget that when you know how developers, when they show you the bill, they ignore everything around. They make everything look green. No, it's not that way. Yeah, they're in a different situation here. So the crisis of urbanization is cutting across. When it floods in Kisumu, Nyalenda, floods in Mukuru, it also floods nowadays in Kileleshwa. Nikweli, everywhere is flooding. When the systems fail in Kenya, they're also failing in US. So it's everywhere. So the looking at urbanization as a system may be a different way of understanding it, and this is Diana Mithley's story. The second one is Sataswat. I remember his name well, that we Sataswat. Like the truth is when we sit and want to get affordable solutions for housing and basic services after we crunch the numbers, it's that somebody is paying for them. We have very little supporting in Nairobi since the beginning of Nairobi. So it's not really a question of affordability or the number, it's a question of minimum acceptable standards of dignity. To quote you, President, it's when you amplify, we need to be amplifying our disruptiveness. We're not asking for, we can all agree, we can all come from different lenses. Mary can come from having been formally housed, another person can come from the informality, but we can all sit together and say this is not dignified. And we can start at that point. So this is a social justice question, therefore a question of about amplifying the right voices to bring. Okay. So finally, it's a question of choice. And it's a debate that I always have with Jane. Because Jane, anytime I used to use the word market, Jane almost used to get a big room
The tailor slippers the mothers used to use on their They didn't like the word market. I don't think they still like it. But one way to bring it is to end with the story and a picture of who we are talking about. Now, we all agree that there is a big problem of looking at something as a whole, homogeneous. There are differences in it, right? That when we enumerate, when we say that 92% tenancy, there are 8% who are born and raised like Mary in Nairobi. True? Started from everywhere. So we grow together. And incidentally, the way Kenya is, the way we need to look at social justice, is that today the person who supervised Mary for a PhD grew up in Korogosho, born raised. So it's not a question of up and down. We have all need to found our voices and our ways and our paths within the system that has held us together. I bring the story about Daudi, and Daudi happens to be one of a critical mass within the same system. Daudi can be your caretaker, can be the guard, can be the guy who washes, who parks cars in town, can be the porter, the person who chooses to be a porter in industrial area. But more often than not, they have a job that is slightly not fully recognized. Makes 10 to 15,000, has a home outside Nairobi, and is able to build. The data from KNBS, as much as we debate on data, we always look for that starting point. And I'm excited that the way government is going, we all have the same common standpoint. KNBS has come a long way. That when 43% of people like Mary own land with title, 46% of people like Mary own land with title, 43% of Daudis own land with title. Statistically speaking, that's the same number, 46, 43, plus and minus. So the ownership looks the same right across the two different spaces. And this person already owns a home, a structure. Let's call it a structure. While the government is asking him today to spend 4,000 per month to own a one-room house for 600,000 shillings after 15 years. In those 15 years, even if he was 20 years old, he's going to be 35 with a child. Somewhere. So it questions the value of it brings to focus the value of choice and question, the value of choice and opportunity, and talk about financial matters and why a poor person would choose to continue paying more today. Allow me to end there. Please help me with the questions and help me grow as a learner. Should really shake the money.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Nelly. You know, I'm a member of Kibera for Kiberans. And now I can see a Nairobian. And I think very soon we talk about Nairobi for Nairobians. Makofi ile yetu ya baridi ya Nairobi to Mary Kipkemoi. Moja! Really? Thank you very much. I think that's the end of the session on presentations. We're moving to the panelists. I noticed Dr. Blessing and Judy Masharia are not there. So moving to the panelists. But before we do that, can we all stand up just for 1 minute? Stand up, because Nairobi is baridi. It's baridi is normal. Now, I want to read what is in front here. And when I say, Oleyo, you jump up and shout at the highest vote, come up Masai. There'll be an Olympic medal for the one who jumps highest. So know your city. Citywide data on slums for partnerships between the urban poor and local government. Oleyo! Know your city. Build forward better with the urban poor. Oleyo! It has been a very rewarding session. As we move to the panel session, I have recorded 6 key questions. There may be others that the panelists may generate in this discussion. Question number 1 is, who are the vulnerable groups? How are their needs to be addressed in the long term? That is question 1A. Question 1B, in addressing the long-term vulnerabilities, how do we ensure that the people are not displaced? So that is question 1A and B. Question 2, given our experience with the pandemic, how do we better prepare for future shocks or other pandemics? It appears the era of pandemic is with us. So how do we prepare better in terms of addressing issues, livelihood, health, and environment? Number 3, it came from Marian's presentation. How do communities fit better and build better within ongoing government processes and programs? Number 4, it has come from Mary Kipkemoi and from Dr. Rachel Tulhurst. The issue of how do we ensure accountability and transparency. We cannot avoid it in this particular discussion. And related to that, from Mary, how do we make better use, how do we leverage financing from the markets? That is the question that just arisen from this presentation. It may be the next question. And the theme for this particular event, how do we get better, plan better, implement better, monitor better, research better with the people? So those are the questions that the panelists will try to respond to. And so I would like to invite the panelists in front. I think, thank you very much, Imani. I would like to introduce Jane Meru, Linux, Professor Jason Coban, and Nancy Wairim, if they are there. But as we proceed, let me first and foremost start by introducing Jane. Jane, I did not acknowledge you when I was acknowledging the president, because I had reserved your introduction for this. I first met Jane Meru at a conference. I used to be the head of the urban programs at ITDG. Now they are called Practical Action. And we are presenting a long body research on bylaws and enabling housing standards. And there was this young girl seated at the conference, like the age of those young girls there. And she stood up with very many questions. And the researchers were getting a bit uncomfortable, because I think before then, we were rather very conventional. And as the president says, Jane is a disruptor. You ask questions. And today you've asked questions. So that defines Jane. Those of us who have been in Muungano, is the last stanza. Woga ni maskini nini? Woga ni? Because Muungano lakini woga ni umaskini. Now Jane represents the anti-woga movement. She has never been afraid to speak up. Thank you very much, Jane. I've been privileged to be a member of the UN Habitat best practices. I've been to Dubai, let me be honest, to look at all these best practices. Had I been nominated to go to the Nobel Prize committee team, because I want to go to Dubai on the simple one, right? Get so many best practices, I would have, without hesitation, nominated Jane Mary for the Nobel Award for Urban Development and Muungano. Can you all clap for Jane and welcome Jane? So then you can now proceed. And then the other panelists, Diana, my sister, Diana, please come forward. George Bashir, my best friend today. The consultant Cap was going to be here. Constant is constant will be. And then we have Emily Wangari. Emily Wangari is here?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So let us now welcome Jane, and then I will introduce the next presenter after that. Tell me when Professor Jason is coming. It's already on.
Yes.
So can I propose Kimani introduce Professor Jason so that we start with the budget and then we proceed. Kimani? Kimani has to start.
You know, I'm wearing this suit courtesy of the CMA movement, the Catholic American Association. So I only wear it when they call me for meetings, and I've refused to go because of being forced to wear this thing all the time. So yes, Prof. Jason of the California UCB, University of California, Berkeley, is a professor. He's helped us a lot, he's influenced a lot our work, built our capacity, our team's capacity, our planners. He's given us perspectives, especially infographics and interpreting data. We've always been having this conversation with Jason over how do we translate this information for community use. All the time with Jane, we pose that question, yes, you can see this data, but if I go to Mukuru and talk about health, how do I speak about health without mentioning all these big names? So that's what we've always, the journey that we've been working with Jason over time, and now a board member of SDI Kenya. Again, Mary Kemboi also here, so privileged to be in this meeting too. So yes, so tumkaribisha pia Jason kwa makofi, the privilege. So welcome Jason, if you are, we understand the time difference in US. Kilon will be attempting to get you. So back to you, Wapi Professor Emeritus Nandoka. Then we get a round of maybe from the questions that have been asked. We just go around responding to them. There's no particular order. Let's just engage with the conversation. But back to you, Ndugu Tusani.
Okay, so you can start with it.
Yes. Thank you. Those are many questions.
You can just take two or three.
Okay.
One or two or three.
Yeah. I think I'd like to take the one on displacement and to combine it with the challenge that Mary indicated that I don't like the word markets, especially when it comes to finance. And I can see Joseph here is laughing. And I can't say I dislike the market when it comes to financing. But our experience, because we've been working with the market, we've been attempting in Muungano to work with the market for financing for very long. And my experience has been a negative experience. From my experience, we find that the interest rates that the market charges, especially the microfinance institutions, that the poor are able to access, charge interest rates that are crazy. Their conditions are very, very are very, what can I say, unfriendly to the poor. And that is where our experience comes from. Just the conditions of the market when it comes to finance. But it's not that we dislike the market. And I agree with what Mary has said, that there can never be one solution that meets everybody's needs and requirements. But I believe strongly that even though not everybody can own a house, every Kenyan, and especially the poor, and if an area is being developed like Nakuru, the people who live there should be given the first option of refusal. That's an eco principle that says that at least I should be asked, Jane, do you want to own a house? And then I can say yes. The other question is, Jane, are you able to own a house? I may not be able to own one, and therefore I may say I do not want, but probably I could live in a rental unit. But I should be given the first right of refusal. And I think that is what I believe should happen. That all the people who live in informal settlements should be given the first right to be homeowners in the areas they have lived in for long. They may not be able to own a house, but then they should be given the right to refuse to own a house. The first right of refusal should be theirs. I think when it comes to displacements, I think it's absolutely fundamental, and I don't think any of us has the answer to it, especially when it comes to upgrading. And we see it like Mario has said. They put a road through a settlement. The next thing they knew, there were 4 stories high buildings. And that is a challenge because there's not much land in Nairobi anymore to spot on. So even though we have very low cases of homelessness in Nairobi, in the next few years, I believe cases of homelessness will increase tremendously if we do not protect the lands that are occupied by the poor today. So homelessness is going to become a common feature in Nairobi if we do not care. And therefore, I think, even though we do not have the answers as how to protect against gentrification, it must be something that we think about and work towards. Because if we do not, I believe homelessness will be with us in the future. I also think that it's important for us to really think about this issue because we are urbanizing very fast. We're urbanizing. Africa is urbanizing very fast. And the question I think for us as Africans is, what kind of Kenyan do we want to see in the coming years? Because if 60% of our population is going to be urban, then are we saying that we want more than 60% of that population to grow up in settlements such as Nakuru? And what will it say of our country? What country will we be if that is the future that we are looking at? So this question of looking for solutions that are inclusive and that respond to the needs of the poorest, I think is fundamentally important because that is our future in the coming years. Because in no time at all, Kenya will be an urban country more than a rural one. Thank you.
I think I'll try to answer the first question. Who are the vulnerable groups in the community? So like for the last 1 year when we had COVID, so most of the organization and the institution were mapping the vulnerable groups as the old age, those people who are old, those people who have special medical conditions, the orphans, and we saw most of the help, the funding was going to that category. And in our settlements, as from my perspective, the age which was more vulnerable is the donkey age. Those people who have kids, who are working, and they have been locked out of the jobs. Like for instance, in Madare, those people who are working in Isili, the active age was the most vulnerable. So as the organizations and the government was giving funding to the vulnerable, you could see an old person was being funded like from 5 organizations. This organization comes, I want to fund the people from 6 years going upwards. I want to fund the ones who are positive. I will give the orphans. So they were being overfunded and given more subsidies, food subsidies. And for the age which have kids, maybe a person like my age, I could not qualify to get any funding. Why? Because I'm in the active age. And that active age was the age which was out of job. Was the age who works in factories, they work in hotels, they were not working at that time. So as from the community perspective, I think everyone in the community is vulnerable. So when we have these initiatives in case of pandemic, it's just to map out the whole community, like you have been doing the regulation. Map out everybody, see the level of economic, what is the economic situation. So everyone should be seen as vulnerable. Also, we had issues of people who are not Kenyans in our communities. They also did not get any funding. And if you fund, you give some people subsidies and the others are not getting subsidies, the economy of that area will still not grow. Because if you have food and your neighbor does not have food, you have to share the food you have. So I think the issue of vulnerability, everybody in the community is vulnerable. Also, the second question, how do we address, how do we ensure that people are not displaced? I think it's working together with the community. If the government wants to put some infrastructure, it's planning together. I think we are tempted to do that in Mokulu. So bring the communities together, plan together, see in case it is a hospital or what, how many people will be displaced, what is the alternative, or if it is a relocation in the same settlement, if we have spaces or it's building upwards. I think it's taking everyone into consideration and not to let everyone get out. So I also attempt to answer this one, how do we prepare for the future? I think it's inclusion for communities to be included in all the interventions that are being made by the government and other partners. And also taking into consideration that the communities have homemade solutions which can help in any activity. For instance, if you want to come to Madare and build that, you want to come with the idea, maybe you want to build a toilet for this community. It is better ask the community, do you need a toilet or what? So maybe the community will say, for now, we don't need a toilet. We need to rehabilitate this one, we have. So it's always putting the community's ideas when planning for the community. Also, I think, like for the Muungano, we've been mobilizing and organizing the community. So for the Muungano, we are better placed to help in any intervention, to mobilize in any intervention. So it's working together with federations from different settlements.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nancy. Nancy Njoki, thank you for the community development perspectives. Nancy, just for those who don't know, Nancy Njoki has been a member of the Slum Dwellers International, the board, and she is really very strong in terms of the savings. That's where I mentioned savings and the issues of strengthening community. So thank you for the community perspectives. Mrs. Diana, how come I'm smiling when I'm introducing you?
I don't know. Okay. Thank you so much. I don't know what I call you, but I was telling Josiah in the morning that I used to look up to him when I was a small child, and now I'm happy to be sharing the same floor with him. Like what Ben was saying, standing on the shoulder of a giant.
Yeah, but I don't know whether I'm going to answer any specific question, but I'm just going to bring out some of the insights from what I've had today, from my experience working with this in this sector for over 12 years now, and also from the research that I'm doing. I'm also doing a PhD, of course, in this sector. It's my passion. I'm looking at issue of existing horizontal inequalities when it comes to access of basic services, because we are so used to talking about vertical inequalities, that there is inequality between Mukuru and Langata, or there is inequality between Madare and Mudaiga. But then when we come down to the settlements themselves, what exists amongst these people that we assume they are homogeneous, and how does this affect them when it comes to accessing services? And actually that is very interesting even to hear what Nancy has mentioned about the vulnerable groups. How do we look at even vulnerable groups, the differences that exist between different groups within the informal settlements? From the discussion in the morning from Dr. Rachel and Sheila, something came up that was very interesting for me in terms of the numbers that we are looking at coming in as poor people from the effects of COVID-19, over 490 million. And we have been fighting with population, the growth of relations of the poor people living or people living in informal settlements. But then we are seeing COVID-19 bringing in another 490 million that we don't know where they are going, but that they are coming to the informal settlements. And these are people we are supposed to plan for or to think about even as we continue these discussions. So it means this battle is nowhere close to an end. It's something we need to keep innovating and thinking differently. So in terms of the question of vulnerable groups, I wanted to maybe discuss it, to bring in something from my research. And something interesting that came out for me is that I think different people are vulnerable at different times, depending on what they are going through. When it comes to access, for example, when it comes to access to water, who is more vulnerable compared to who in the community? So maybe today you'll be talking of a child being more vulnerable, or you're talking of women experiencing more stress from the conditions of access to water. So as Nancy is saying, that when you're looking at targeting these communities in terms of investing in programs, it is important to have the residents of these areas bringing in their voice to define who is supposed to benefit depending on what you're bringing on the ground. If it's for water, who is vulnerable; if it's for housing, who is more vulnerable; who is for, and so forth. So that's something that vulnerability will differ depending on what are we talking about. But of course, there are those defined lines that we work with when we talk of the age, when we talk of maybe people living with disabilities. But depending on what we are doing at different times, that may vary. Then there is the issue of looking at what the government and even the civil society has been doing in informal settlements during the time of COVID, and trying to see at moving to the future. If you look at the kind of interventions that we've had, I would say, from my judgment, not based on any research, that a lot of it has been very short term, or to alleviate the impacts that we're having at that particular time. But then when we try to think of the resilience of these people, if this was to happen 2 years from today, or if this was to happen another, even 20 years, the things that the NMS, us, even as people in the civil society, the things that we've been doing, they start still to help these communities to overcome those shocks that come with things like pandemics. And in that case, then, us trying to look at future, we have to look at how we build community assets. Of course, the 5 obvious assets that we talk about, the physical assets in terms of access to land. When we talk about social assets for the communities, that is very important, the social relations, that how they live together with each other and how they support each other. Then we have things like financial assets in terms of making finances available for communities or people living in informal settlements, and even in terms of human assets, like what Marion was talking about, in terms of making skills available to these people, so that then these skills can enable these people to generate income, or to generate income for themselves even in future. And for us to be able to do that, then also we have to look at the role of institutions, both the government, the private sector, and the civil society. I don't know why in the informal settlement, we enjoy wanting to relate so much with the government and also the civil society, but for the private sector, and I like the last question that Josiah asked, how can the market also fund what we are doing? What is the role of even the private sector? Because the government has given the private sector a big role in our economy, so we cannot really try to say we don't want to benefit from them. We have to see how to benefit from them also when they come to invest in our cities. And this is an approach even some cities are taking up that is really changing how cities work, even in terms of regulating the private sector and how they invest in the cities, putting in regulations like the inclusion and housing, that for every 3 units that an investor provides for the rich, they have to give 2 units for the middle income, and they have to give a unit for the people living in, for the poor. And so again, that leads with another question that I want to touch on, how the communities can fit better when it comes to doing all this. I think there is 2 ways of looking at it. We have to build the horizontal relations of communities, and also we have to build the vertical relations. How community relates with the institutions that exist within the communities. When you go down into the informal settlements, we all work there, we all live there, we know there is a lot that is happening. So there has to be linkages, we have to link efforts that happen on the grassroots, and then also see how that is linking with the vertical, the governance institutions. And maybe, Marion, next time you can help us bring in more from the vertical side, especially for the government, so that we voice the hears, and also we can also be able to listen to one another. So I think there's the need for the linkage, both vertical linkage and also the horizontal linkages.
Thank you very much, Diana McCarthy. Diana is bringing in something very, very unique here in terms of the assets. I recall the Sustainable Livelihood Framework, and perhaps a writer on those assets would really be called for if you're to move forward in terms of understanding the livelihood assets of vulnerable people. That's very, very useful insights. Our next panelist is Emily Wangari from Mathare. It's very poetic, Wangari from Mathare. Kimani, the COVID protocol requires that this microphone be sanitized before it goes to Emily. Emily, karibu. Mtindo wa kisasa ni kusafisha mkono. Mtindo wa kisasa. Karibu.
Okay, asante. I'm Emily Wangari from Mathare, and I will start with the data because I've been involved in so many researches and data. Back then, from 2010, when we did our Mathare zone planning, and I feel that if we tap on the resources and we harmonize the data that we Mathare have collected, then we can do wonders. And the second part is the second part is about the displacement. My point of view is, why don't we, before we displace, we go back to historical injustice? And from maybe Mathare, we exist from before even independence. Our grandparents fought for this independence. And it's a shock that we, the 5th generation, somebody somewhere will come and say that this land belongs to me. And my question is, how? when you were buying, where were we? The person who was selling, why didn't you first ask us or give us the first priority to buy the land? If we don't fit or we don't have money, then we pay going for the one who is buying. But we didn't have that option. Ni kujikuta tulijikuta. But I think when we go back to the historical injustice, then we shall solve this part of displacement. Because I believe our government have structures from up to down. And we have the area chiefs who play part in this relocating illegal structures to whoever comes by. Maybe it's money oriented or I don't know. But I can give an example. There was a time in Mathare whereby we had this program of removing people from the river, riparian. And the Chinese came and they gave the people who are occupied the area some allowances so that they can pave the way for the sewer to pass. And immediately the sewer passed. Now it was the project of the area chief to be given another money to return the houses on the riparian. Now, right now there is another project that people are now being evicted from the river. What process is there? It will be displacement. But whose fault? Whose fault? It is the government. Because the chief, according to me, it is the office of the president, representative of the president, and he's the one who is doing this. So my people are going to suffer because of somebody. Then another question, how do community feed better? We community, we feed better if we are involved in everything that is happening. Be it change, be it anything. Because we believe that we are the bearers of this shoe and we are the ones who are wearing the shoe. So we know, we say we are the solution and we are the problem. And if we are involved, I think hakutaharibika pahali. We shall sit down and find the solutions. Right now, the government is busy doing the Agenda 4. And where do we fit in this Agenda 4? Because there is the part of the housing, and we are seeing beautiful houses in Pangani, in Ngara, and we are asking ourselves, where are we? Don't we need these houses? What is the procedure? What is the protocol? Nobody is thinking about us, but we need these houses. And how do we make sure that? Let me go back to the displacement. I once participated in the data collection of when the government said that people should move from railway lines under the high voltage, but we went round, collected the data, we went to the demonstrations, and we had Mr. Bucha. We sat down with him, and we had some plans. But right now, we are silent. Only maybe they are planning something, and they will ambush us. And maybe it's like we are very comfortable, but in our informal settlement, we are never comfortable. Right here, I might be sitting here and maybe the bulldozer is at my door. One thing I make sure is that my phone is not off. My phone is not off. But we have tried. We have tried to engage government. We have tried to tell the government that we don't like stealing water, stealing electricity. We like sitting down and negotiating on how I will pay my bills. I can pay because I pay. I pay for water, but I pay for work. I pay for electricity, but I pay the legal person who is connecting the electricity to me. But this is so good. We want to pay, but we want to pay for the person who is applying to me, and I want to pay legally, not illegally. So it is high time that the government comes, and we are welcoming you, Mariam, to Mathare. We are planning ourselves. We have a spark, and we have already started collecting data and tapping on other data so that we can implement, because we want these services. Thank you.
Not yet. COVID measures. Thank you very much, Margaret. Our next panelist is Conrad. So Constance Kapp. Constance Kapp is a prolific writer on issues urban planning, urban informality. Very well. It's a pleasure to meet you today because we connect online. I think we are even members of 2 or 3 WhatsApp groups. It's a pleasure to hear your voice today, Constance.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to speak with such esteemed people on this panel. I'll start with a very interesting statement and maybe taken controversially. But we've talked about market and how it's not a favorable word. But it's very interesting that our CS, it's called Motihan, Ministry of Transport, Infrastructure, Housing and Urban Development, is actually a banker. And the PS Housing is also a banker. And there are many other bankers in that field. But it gives a perception, and I think it will be a bit controversial. It gives a perception of the direction that we are taking as a country. And that's why my friend here, Emily, will say, we're seeing houses, but we don't know who those are for. I know there's a lot of talk about bottom up, top bottom, whatever. But clearly, the direction being taken is that to let the market play its role and everybody for itself, which is very unfortunate because from a planning perspective, if we were to follow the planning process, and most of us here have been involved in the planning process, one way or another, whether we are planners or not, at this point in time, we realize that there's a place for everyone. Unfortunately, in our situation, many times we have professionals who fear participation of community. They want to come with solutions and give communities solutions to their problems. And then we also have communities that do not trust either public or professionals, which is what made me very happy listening to our chief guest today, because that's a clear understanding of someone who understands how processes are supposed to be. And we have a ladder of participation, which I don't need to go into, because everybody plays their role. Professionals may be able to design solutions based on understanding how people in the communities live. We understand that people, for instance, want to engage in what we call petty trade or small scale trade, and therefore we don't want to put them on the 7th floor of a building. And then we complain when they go to the roadside. So that participatory approach, which brings another interesting point that was raised, our reliance on development partners. We are currently in a city whose most recent plan was done by the Japanese, we all know. And plain and simple, I'll tell you, none of these partners come here with your interest in the first place. They may be good people and everything, but there's always that interest. And with the current Nairobi plan, you can see it more from a transport perspective, which I don't want to go into, where you get to see actually the direct interest our friends who are now hosting the Olympics, as we know. Then we also have, and this participatory approach, so it so that can go any can be done in any field. Even when we're talking of we want to build a market, are we going to go and build a shopping mall, or are we going to understand how trade happens, how people with disability will be involved, how even how markets function before we engage, before the professionals actually go into the first-hand design process, other than just going and designing. I'll give you just two very interesting anecdotes, actually three short ones that have been involved. I'm involved in an organization that uses low-cost technology to try to help communities that are affected by different types of pollution, more recently air pollution, and also a bit of water. And we had a very interesting experience where an upper middle class residents area were affected by air pollution from a factory. And we developed air quality monitors, installed them, came up with the evidence, presented to the media, and as soon as the media came up, the factory were quick to divert their air pollution. But what did they do? They didn't stop the air pollution, they just diverted it to a poorer community. Yesterday we got to learn now have been experiencing those the effects of this particular air pollution, which goes back to ask the question: are we still living within those these silos? Within these silos, we also have an interesting area that has not had been talked about, but is highly important in this city, which is informal trade. And we have informal trade is something that is continuing to has been a problem. Not a problem, has been in existence for decades, but it continues to be seen by some people as something negative, but for others as also welcome. How do we integrate all aspects of our society, from upper middle class residents associations to urban roads authority to the city council as carriers, to ensure that these people are protected and these livelihoods are taken care of. And I tend to agree highly with what our sister there said, that everybody is vulnerable. It's not just, there are some that are more vulnerable, some groups are more vulnerable, but in different environments, everybody has some level of vulnerability. And that is why, taking care of the planning, the participatory planning approach, fully inclusive planning approach gets important, such that when we are undertaking or undergoing through any form of project, we're able to ensure that all levels, from children, right through to the persons with disabilities, are engaged, are included. I'm currently involved in a study where we're trying to map the travel experiences of elderly people, persons with disabilities, and women. And you realize that, especially people who walk their journeys, and you already realize that the walking experience among poor people who have to go to different jobs is quite a shame, because the good walking infrastructure is in Kilelesh or Kilimani, I don't know where, which tells a lot about our prioritization. I can talk a lot more, but I will just do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next panelist, George Gashie, from UN Habitats. Don't worry about that, they're both on face mask. So they've got a green, so very good. Thank you very much for your input in terms of the informal trade. I think that's one aspect that we really need to look at. Okay, good.
Thank you, and it's also a pleasure to sit here with this distinguished panelists. And not to repeat what has been said, I would like to pick on one important issue, which also was mentioned earlier by Marion, and this is documentation. I think this is one aspect that we all need to take it as seriously, because where we are going now, I see a situation where, for example, the Mukuru case it is already a case study, it is like a best practice, but then we need to ensure that there's proper documentation of each process and step. And the reason why I'm talking about documentation is because, as Josiah said, he started working in Mathare in the late 70s, 1979, and way before I was born. I'm born in Mathare, but there's a lot that we don't know about our community. I mean, Emily has said Mathare has been there since before independence. There are stories of houses being demolished in the 50s in Mathare. But then after that, we don't know what happened. So it's like, you know, no one was there, or really like no one is following up on this. So I feel that it is important we look into these issues of documenting our communities, because then they will also help us understand where we're coming from and also where we're going as a community and as a people. So one of the platforms that UN Habitat, or rather the UN has, is the World Urban Forum. And during the last World Urban Forum in Abu Dhabi, we organized the Grassroots Assembly. And this was co-organized by SDI and Swaru Commission, together with UN Habitat, where we brought together grassroots leaders from different regions and countries to share their experiences. And I feel moving forward, this is something that will be featured more in such forums. And therefore it is important that we have it well documented. The other thing is, one of the declarations that came from the last assembly, the Grassroots Assembly, was lobbying to have finances directed to community-led actions. This is something, again, that we need to push for. And really, this has been exposed by this COVID-19 pandemic, where everyone was told to stay at home. And there are so many cases of, that came out from the informal settlements, where they were sort of left, those living in slum neighborhoods are left on their own in many cases. And therefore, if these funds are directed to community-led actions, then you're building the capacity of these grassroots leaders and the communities to be able to respond to such pandemics also, should they happen in the near future. Another thing that, this is optional now, this is to everyone. We know that Islam is defined using the UN defines it with 5 slum deprivations, and they are similar to what was presented here. So at what point then do we say someone has moved from a slum-like condition? We know, for example, if maybe you're meeting 3 of the 5 definitions of slum, does that move you from a slum-like condition, or do you really have to wait until you meet all the 5 slum deprivations? So this is just a question that I would also like, us to discuss here today. But otherwise, we as the Participatory Slum Upgrading Program have also been in the front line pushing for participatory decision making when it comes to slum upgrading. And we have many examples that I could give, but just to mention one, we are working in Kilifi, Mtwapa, where 2 of the informal settlements are being reclaimed together with the county government of Kilifi, and the communities are taking lead on this. And this also sort of like gives them that confidence also to work with the authority, because for long people have been having that mistrust. And when we sit together with the communities and with the authorities, we can see that this is changing. This is really changing, and it's a positive thing. So because of time, I will end it here, but again, emphasize on the importance of documentation, and I feel that this is something that we should discuss moving forward. So thank you.
So thank you very much, our fellow panelists, and George, thank you very much for that input on documentation, multimedia documentation. I recall in Brazil, they're now writing stories of the favelas, and the books and the videos and podcasts that I really inspire me when I think about favelas in Brazil. I know we can maybe have better stories here. They are here now. We are catching up with time, and I think this has been a marathon. It's Olympics. It's been marathon, starting and sitting up to this time. I requested that we go up to 10 past, at most maybe 12 or 13 minutes past. So I'd like to open up this discussion to you. If you can just lift your hands and we get your number, so that we can open up, get additional questions, so I give you number one. You get your number two, number three. Number four, number five. Tosha, very. So number one, microphone. And what we'll do, our panelists, we'll only give like 2 or 3 because of time responses. So pick any of the questions and we'll ask any of them to respond. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you. I'm Dennis Orengo from Mathare Social Justice Center. And my first question, I would like to pose the answer. The question, what can we do to ensure that we recover the grabbed lands? Because you have so many public lands which are grabbed within our formal settlements, and they are really applying a lot of pressure. Then, as Mary said, numbers do not tell the whole story. And sometimes you find in informal settlements, we pay more for some services. So what are some of these services that we pay more? So that even as we do lobbying and advocacy, we can always ensure that the slum-like conditions are reduced. Then lastly, as Madam Rono said, we should also focus on the software bit, not just focusing on the hardware. And this implies what can we do, especially in working with the multi-agency approach, whereby, for example, we work or collaborate with the Ministry of Health in ensuring that informal settlements realize issues to deal with, for example, universal health coverage. Thank you.
Number 2. Number 2.
Thank you. I think for me, really is not questions, but just to clarify and also comment on some things to more or less support the panelists. Let me start with Constance, and I think I really love what you have said, and I think like my people have talked, I'm also doing a PhD in housing, and I'm actually looking at how you can support the market-driven approaches to more or less be able to do housing for the low income. So I think this discussion is very passionate to me, and I think it's also aligned with me. So Constance, I am totally with you. I think you should not even shy away from feeling like what you want to say about market-driven approaches will not be taken lightly, because I think for me, and having worked in the area of housing for the last many years, from 1993, I think to me that is the way to go. Honestly, I think to me that is the way to go. And I think I'll also pose a question, which I think I asked Jane also here. Must we as Kenyans be owners of housing for our livelihood, for us to have better quality housing? Must we be owners? How many countries in the world do we know of where people are actually living in rented accommodation and they have beautiful homes? They have beautiful homes. So must we be honest as Kenyans for us to improve our slums? Must we? But now, again, it comes to the question that my sister from Mathare asked. Yes, you can see us. In fact, I would love to comment on that. You can see that houses are being built. You can see Pangani. In fact, Pangani is our pioneer project as a county in terms of the affordable housing agenda. Yes, I know housing is also earmarked in the slum. I believe it's only a matter of time that we have not come to you, but I believe that the lessons that we are learning from the pioneer projects of Pangani and Jivanji are lessons that we are going to bring on board even as we talk to you about housing in Mathare. Then lastly, on the issue of documentation, Jane, I think I will pose a challenge to our Mukuru team. I think these are critical lessons we should not just lose. In fact, to me, it will be a joy to see myself writing a chapter in that book. So Jane, I think, let us take it up. Let us see how we can be able to document that process. So thank you very much.
Number 3.
Hello, my name is Christine Amado. I'm from Nairobi City County, from the Department of Gender, Community Development, and Disability. Maybe as a panelist, we're addressing issues, the issue of transparency and accountability. I didn't hear anybody touch on it. And probably as we are addressing it, probably where there's probably the slum, where can they channel the issue? Because it's becoming very hard to reach the government up to the top. And probably we need to develop systems that permeate the red tapes and the barriers that are within the government so that the issues can be addressed. I was hearing one person saying that we need to bring in, Madam Marion needs to bring in more people so as to listen. But there should be systems that we don't have to have a sitting like this for the government to listen. And then number 2, also the issue of infrastructure affecting, influencing socio-economic empowerment. Probably I've heard of more in this forum, I've heard of socio-economic empowerment being related so much to infrastructure. Not sure that one can be explained so that some of us can be able to understand. Those are the main issues.
Okay, that's number 3. Number 4. Thank you.
This is George Jeroge from Stockholm Environment Institute. I would like to touch further the question of how we monitor and research better when trying to solve some of these problems in urbanization. Emily from Mathare touched on this issue, and she mentioned that there's a lot of data that has been collected over the years. And I think what she was trying to imply is that we need to analyze this data into actionable and utilizable formats. As researchers, we need not just engage in academic explorations. We need to be asking ourselves pertinent research questions that address some of these problems that you're talking about. Also, in the course of my research studies, especially in the slum areas, noticed communities developing fatigue because of the repetitiveness of some of these researches that you're doing. So communities want to see action. They want to see solutions from these studies that you're conducting. There's also a tendency for us researchers to focus more on the research problems. And there's very little focus on progress. I know there are some good practices that are happening on slum upgrading. The current improvements that are going on in Mukuru is one of the case studies that need to be put forward as and applied in other upcoming slum upgrading projects. And also, this is also a question of the research design. Is research an issue or a task for people who are known as scientists and researchers. How do we make it more participatory with input of communities? I know a number of organizations that you're working with are doing research, and I've interacted with a number of organizations, including SDI, and I've seen them doing very participatory service in the communities. From our perspective, we call it citizen science, and in most of our studies, we are trying to apply the citizen science approach. And finally is how we apply this research, and we need to confront the policymakers and other decision makers with these facts and data, so that this research can inform decision making and planning for improvements in urbanization and slum improvement projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I number 5?
Number 4.
Number 5. Number 5. Please.
We call it Atoka Ngozi. Probably it's a comment, and it's on the previous panel in regards to the question on the market, if the market can provide a solution for housing. And I think Jane mentioned our challenges in the last, sometimes back, we were looking at the market, and I think it was a disaster. We can't even talk about it when we approach the market to provide something. So for me, I don't think also, if Emily says for the next 20 years, her savings alone won't be enough. And I think we need to think what will be the best, probably a combination of the market, savings, probably government comes in, subsidies. If you look at Kibaki, he came in 2002. There were promises of, I think, how many? 200,000 houses. Up to date, I don't know how many, 1,000 have been done. Then again, you look at the railway location. How many houses were done? I think more than 9,000. So that tells you something. And I think it speaks to, I think we need to rethink. We keep on doing the same crap, putting in the same crap, and we expect different results. And I think it's a challenge for us to challenge the government and to challenge the city. Let's do things differently. Because everybody comes now, there was Agenda 4. Agenda 4 promised how many houses? 200,000 again. And I don't know why 200,000 is the magic number. You promise 200,000, you deliver. I wish Mario left. The projects we are talking about in Pangani, 2,000 houses. And there was in Waboma, what was it called? Bomayang. It was oversubscribed. What we came to later understand is that even before the foundation stone was laid, this was Nyumba 2000, it was in Asia. Nobody, I don't know, I'm here to see somebody who actually, just a normal person who actually saved in the Bomayang. A lot of people at the moment, they are getting their refunds because they're being told there's another pipeline in Mavoko, then there's another pipeline in Kisumu. You wait for those ones. We don't know if they're going to the same. If we have police wamechukua 500, sijui nani amechukua, CS amechukua, CS lazima. I think there's a system talked about corruption. Same thing. By the time zinafikia, nyumba inafikia Emily, zimekula huku juu zimeisha. So probably those are the things that I think we need to challenge and the things we need to do. They go and look at the railway location. At least there was, but at least it's slum dwellers who benefited, not CS apate zake tano, nani tano. By the time zinafikia Emily, probably 1 or 2. So those are the things that we keep on challenging.
So let me see who among the panelists will be responding. Let me start this side. The same order. No, there will be 3 because of time. Constance, Emily, Diana, and then 1 or 2. Okay, let's start with Constance.
Thank you very much. Somebody has asked about transparency and accountability. I think it was Christine on the NCCG. And there's a very important word that was used during the keynote speech, and that word is governance. We saw, was it almost 6 years of county government, and within 1 year of NMS, we've seen more work than in the last 20 years. That word is very, very important. And we know, and I'll speak from a built environment perspective, that when you have bad governance, things are shrouded with secrecy. Okay, a very good example is the development control approval process. You all remember that when Major General, Lieutenant Major General Badi came into office, one of the things he actually blocked was the approval process. Because we all know that this had become almost like a business. And there's a lot of, and when you ask what are the zoning regulations, what are the development control guidelines of the city, no one will tell you. Then you hear rumors that, you have to do 7 floors there. Each floor is X amount to people in certain office. So that one is critical. Because through open governance, now you can get that sense of transparency and accountability. And I know some neighborhood groups already now in that development control process who hold meetings with NMS and questions are asked. Stories about MEMA is another story altogether. I wouldn't go into that. And tied to that is also the question that Orengo has asked about grant land and public spaces. Because one of the things we're all trying to find out is where is the inventory of public spaces. I know our friends at UN Habitat used one, but we know that there are those of us who've grown up in the city, like Josiah, Marion, etc. We know certain playgrounds that are not in that inventory because now they are full of flats and shops and shopping malls. Okay? So again, it's tied to transparency and accountability. It's only until our friend Temi Wakiama posted the new commission report online for everyone to see that many people actually saw it for the first time. I think he published it two years ago after some friends of ours shared it with him. So that aspect of governance becomes very important. I'll touch a bit on one of the questions on markets, and I'll leave you with a question. Could it be that our building code makes construction of houses too difficult sometimes? I'll just leave it at that.
Maybe this is what I should be doing. Sorry, I should be doing that part.
Okay, I want to respond to my friend Madare Social Justice, who asked about what do we pay for. We pay more for everything. We pay more for water. We pay more for electricity. We pay more for houses. Everything is expensive. Why? Because the person who is coming to take the revenue, he will hike wherever he feels like. When we have shortage of water, I go and buy for 20 liters, for 20 or 50. It's according to him. But the people who are supplied directly by the government or they have meters, there is no one single type that they will find the amount hiked. Another question is about, it's not a question, it's a recommendation about transparency and accountability now. The representative from the county. Our problem is, let me take an example of when we visited the county because of Tiamotesia. The manager, there is a person there called Ingiasi, a planner. We tried to engage his boss, and Indiasi was sent to Kemotesia to take photos to prove that there is informal settlement known as Kemotesia. We took him there, he took some photos, he did the survey, we paid for the survey, we took the report, but unfortunately before the implementation part, he went to further studies. The person who replaced him, we had now to start again in engaging with him. By the time they implemented the implementation, he was shifted to another office. So by the time now we started now to engage with the next person, he said, I don't understand what you are saying. And all this time we had to photocopy. Every time we engage with the new person, we photocopy again. So we felt tired. We moved to City Hall Annex, 5th floor. When we saw the advertisement about the county giving titles, we went to know our fate. We started engaging again, and we are good in researches. We researched and we knew who is holding Kemotesia title. The whole of it is a private lawyer in Westlands, and we went to engage with him. He told us, if you want me to help you, go and find Sonko as governor to come so that we can negotiate on some amount so that I can give you back your title. And we tried to understand how is he holding the title. I asked him if he has ever been to Kemotesia. He said no. The far he has been near to Kemotesia, it's along Juja Road, passing the car. Then I asked him, and how are you holding this title? He said there is a company known as Mushoka Nerevia and Mathare United. They owe him some money. He's holding the title as maybe a trustee or something. And he started negotiating with us to give him money so that he can acquire the title. But we didn't want to be the grabbers, so that now we can start evicting our brothers. So we wanted to negotiate the whole thing so that we can sort out with them. But when he said about the Sonko, and to find the Sonko is very difficult, that is where our struggle ended until today. So there is these offices, but for them to be accountable to us or to help us, it is very difficult. Thank you.
Dan?
I just wanted to make a comment on the question or the point that George made about monitoring, and I think Madam there, on monitoring and the issue of accountability, and also how can we research better. I think in January, February, we were doing a research on citizen engagement in the urbanization process and also the role of technology, and I had a chance to speak with George, President here, and a number of us here, and even Marion and the government offices. And something that came out very interesting is that there is a lot of work that is going on when it comes to citizen engagement on issues of accountability, monitoring, evaluation, especially in the grassroots. There is the law, the constitution that is empowering people to do this, and people are doing this on the ground. But the bigger question now remains on the linkage. How can we voice, even with the data, how can we research better? When I was talking to the president here, I realized they no longer go around with questionnaires asking questions and coming to key and to analyze. You're doing real-time data collection. If I key in my data now, the database changes in the office or wherever it is. It means we are doing research better compared to what we were doing 10 years ago. But then the question is, how are we using these facts, or how are we using this information that we have? And I will link that to when I was on the first presenter was presenting, I think that was Kilian, and he projected some data on 60% of Nairobi population live in informal settlements. Then I asked myself, I think I had this statement came out in 2003 when the UN defined what a slum is. And we have been doing a lot of data in the informal settlements over and over and over. And I believe we have the power, and especially the people in this room, the SDI, we have the power to come in a different figure and bring it out and talk about it. And it will be adopted. Because why I'm saying it will be adopted, I look at even the SPA. We went and talked to the offices, but when did they listen to our story? It was when you say the fact that 7 billion is in Mukuru, and you can use this to fund the health department in the county for 5 years. Then the story became interesting. And it became a fact, and they quote it. And even if you look at their documents, it's quoted. So I also think we have the power to use the information that we generate, because we are generating it and we are doing it. But then how are we using it? Are we bringing it out, even to challenge what we are seeing up here? So Killian, maybe challenge that 60%. Next slide.
I think I'll try and attempt to answer the question of connection between the social economic and the infrastructure. Just a simple illustration. If you have a good road, you are able to do your businesses faster. You save a lot of time, you save time, you save money. If you have a hospital, you spend less going to look for a hospital, going to look for medicine, so you save on your finances. Also, you have electricity, you have water, so this is all connected to the social economic life. If you have good infrastructure, you save a lot.
I think just a comment on the private sector. I think if you look at the private sector, it is very, very active. In fact, what you see in Mukuru is a pure private sector economy. It's when you look at Mukuru, you look at what private sector looks like with minimal government. I mean, when you look at informal settlements, you see what private sector looks like and what private sector delivers in the absence of the state and state regulation. That is what a slum is. So let's not say, when we talk about housing, that we're going to involve the private sector in housing, because they're already involved in housing, in informal settlements. And what we see, we do not like. Isn't that the case? So now the new question is, how do we develop something with the private sector that we like and that ensures that, as our constitution says, that the poorest and the most marginal are protected? Because that's the only reason why the state is in Mukuru and not in Muthaiga, providing services in Mukuru. So that, I think, is a major question. How do we change the place and improve the products that are delivered in that area by private sector? And how do we include the poorest? I think on the issue of land, I think Nairobi has, and most urban areas have a fantastic opportunity, fantastic opportunities that we need to probably see how we can work together to ensure that we obtain land for development. First is that in all urban areas under Kenyan law, most of the titles that are there are leaseholds, and most of them have special conditions. And I think what we have always been saying is, can the state do what it needs to do? Can the state take back the lands that it owns in informal settlements that have not been developed? I think also the other opportunity that is there is the migration of titles from RTA to the new Land Registration Act. I think Muungano really needs to come, another informal settlements need to come together and say, please, why are you giving titles, new titles, to people who have lands that they haven't developed in our settlements? Those titles should not be given. Those titles should be held. Those titles should not be migrated. So I think I see those two as fantastic opportunities, and I think we need to push forward. Thank you.
This has been very, very rich. Can we commend?
Can I come in?
From Oh,
This is Sheila.
Oh.
I'm patiently listening to this amazing conversation. But I want to follow up on something which I think impacts a very important element of history. I think, Jane, you should talk about the studies that you did that led you to understand all the lands that were given to various businesses at the time of Kenya's independence to start businesses, to produce employment, with the caveat that if the organization does not start a business, then that land should revert to the state. Most of Mukuru is on such private land. As is the situation, I might tell you, in all the Anglophone countries, including India, where the first land that was given to us in India to rehabilitate the pavement dwellers, it turned out was given to a soap factory to develop soap since 1947. And in 2005 had not done so, yet they took us to court and they took the government to court saying that that land belonged to them, and then we got it. So a very important discussion here should be a very important transformation in the architecture of accountability to say that when responsibilities and resources are provided to the formal private sector and they relegate on it, the Constitution and the state is very careful not to challenge it in the same manner that it challenges the urban poor who squat on land simply because there is no other land. And I think this is an important aspect for discussion in today's conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. Also, thank you very much. Can we all acknowledge from a cold city of Nairobi, can we all acknowledge the panelists? Moja! Billy! Just in terms of closing, I heard from Emily Wangari. Emily is here, but Emily doesn't know whether she should go back and find herself a victim. Let me just, as part of my closing remark, assure Emily that in our national anthem we say, may justice be our shield and defender. On the 16th of July this month, the Supreme Court of the Republic of Kenya ruled, that is one of the landmark rulings in this republic since the 1960s, that the people living in the informal settlements have the progressive right to housing. In no uncertain terms, I've read that ruling from page 1 to the last page. I have a copy of the ruling which I will email right now. And that the state organs have the responsibility to respect, protect, and fulfill those rights. There is no appeal when it comes to the final determination of the rulings of the Supreme Court of the Republic of Kenya. As a result of that, the Supreme Court has ordered the government to compensate the victims, 326 victims of City Cotton, to compensate them immediately. So for me, that is a very landmark ruling. And I would request SDI to disseminate that information because the media did not carry it, the press did not carry it, it was not in the TV station, but it is one ruling of the Supreme Court which has made my day. With those few remarks, I think now I have appetite, we had our lunch, can we have a lunch break? What time do we come back? What time do you come back?
If you can earlier than an hour, better, about an hour.
An hour. So thank you very much, and thank you very much.
Yes. Alikuwa anachukua. Don't care.
Yes, I tried. Let me say tried because of
What did it Look at the president.
Recording stopped.
Camila, I think I'll need my codes.
Yeah, that's it.
Hizi nawe tukitoka nje tutasikia baridi, hata nimeanza kusikia baridi hapa. Hii siwezi vaa nini? Hii ni ya ndani ya taarifa hiyo. Ndio vile. Sweater.
Sidhani kuna mtu ataingia. Hata nilizioni ni.
because unajua zingine si kubwa kama ile labda ni Jane, unataka hiyo ama hii? Moja, chagua moja.
Ile kitu sitakuwa nayo Mungu.
How was the reaction for it?
It has gone out. We don't have as many nini. What we have ni Twitter. We have a lot of engagement on Twitter.
Mimi ndio
Nimeona hata kuna moja nimekutag. I'm seeing you people and your efforts.
How safe are these?
They should be safe.
They should be safe.
Yeah, we cannot compromise.
Wanaenda kuuliza security first. I can't afford using them. Huku ni kudark ndani, so nitumie flash.
Labda vijamtandika. Unaona gari chini ya dedication. Very panel. Hata kama tulianguka mara ya kwanza but tuko. Watu wana nini? Strong. I know, right? Tunasema itafika.
Sindio? Yeah. Some of the engagement I'm seeing online. Okay.